Now, how hard is it to change karma? How hard is it to change karma? There are 3 different kinds of karmas in regards to how stuck they might be. How are we on time? Okay. So there's dridha karma, which are fixed karmas. These give fixed results because they are so difficult to challenge or change. Dridha karmas usually appear when 3 or more factors relating to the same area of life give the same or similar indication. The greater the number of indications, the more fixed the karma and the more difficult it is to change. Dridha, adridha karma, fixed, non-fixed. These occur whenever several factors relating to a particular area give similar indications. These karmas can be changed through the use of willpower, though considerable effort or determination is likely required. Adridha, non-fixed karmas. These give non-fixed results because they are easily altered. Adridha karmas usually have no more than one factor active in relationship to a particular area of life. Negative adridha karma is usually easily overcome with a little determination and common sense. And the great thing about this is that you can actually transform some of these karmas to non-fixed karmas. And it usually happens through habit. So dridha, fixed karmas, the greater number of indications point towards it. Okay, what would an example of that be? Let's go back to the idea of health. Well, let's say your mother and your father both have heart disease and diabetes. Let's say that's one factor. Well, 2 factors, because your mother and your father have it. Let's say your grandparents had it too. All right, there's 4 more factors. Let's say all you do is go to your office and sit behind a desk, drink your soft drinks, eat your chips, come home, watch TV, listen to music, go to bed, and repeat that. Well, there's at least 7 or 8 factors pointing towards things which will support heart disease, diabetes, and difficult health outcomes. You can't change your genetics, at least in theory. I believe it is possible to alter gene expression, but you can't change what your parents did and were up to. Can you get off the couch and go exercise? You sure can. Can you go for walks during your breaks at work? You sure can. Can you stop drinking the soda and the excess sugar? You sure can. Can you find a personal trainer to help you navigate this stuff intelligently? Yes, you can. So that thing which seemed to be such a fixed karma, and believe me, again, living in West Virginia, which is one of the states that has one of the highest obesity rates and, just difficulties in that regard, you can be sure that I've met people who, when you bring up being able to change their situation, say, oh, I can't do it because my parents did that and so on, and I've got to go out to eat and there's no good food options and so on. They're not really interested, at least consciously, in changing. But you know, and I know, that there are things you can do. So we always have to be cautious about, is this really a fixed karma? Or is it just in our minds that it's fixed? Can we do something different? Dridha, adridha. Things that can be changed through the use of willpower, although considerable effort or determination is likely required. When I began practicing meditation, I meant business. I wanted to meditate. And I was so happy to hear Danelle when she was talking about attending our 2-hour solstice meditation tomorrow. She's in New Zealand. It's 14 hours difference or something like that. So it's going to be 2 a.m. in the morning when she has to log in to do that. But she says, I've set my alarm. I'm going to do it. And I could tell by her voice that, yeah, she meant business. She was going to be there. Not everyone's going to do that. Not everyone wants to do that. But because of willpower, she's going to be able to overcome the typical habit of wanting to be asleep during that time. When I first began meditating, I wasn't very good at it at all, and I wanted to get up early and do it. So I had to find a way to force myself to do it. So what did I do? I did some very unpopular things. Number 1, I set an alarm, and I put it across the room. So I had to get up out of bed to go turn that alarm off. And I decided that when that alarm went off, I was just going to get up and go sit in my meditation chair and get started. Just start doing alternate nostril breathing, just go, not even think about it. And if my mind said, oh, I don't want to do it, I didn't care. I didn't listen to my mind. Another thing that I had to do, I was in a long-term relationship at that point in time. I had a beautiful woman sleeping beside me every night. It was very comfortable. And I noticed that when I was sleeping there, I didn't want to get out of bed. Well, who would want to in that situation? So I decided that I was going to go sleep in the other room. And remember, I'd been in a long-term relationship. So to tell your partner, oh, I'm sorry, I can't sleep and snuggle with you anymore because I want to meditate. That can be stressful. But I told her, I said, this is important to me. And there was hurt feelings for a couple months. But eventually she understood, and that passed. And I slept in this other room on a cot, so I wouldn't be that comfortable. So it'd be easy for me to get up in the morning. So that was my use of willpower, using considerable effort to make a change in my sleeping habits so I could meditate better. And I had to do the same thing with my diet, the people I hung out with. All these things had to occur, and it occurred through willpower, struggle, stress. But once you learn how to do it, it just becomes natural. Then things become what you call udrita karmas. So what would be an example of an udrita karma? Well, they're easily overcome. My friends come to visit, they want to stay up late and play music. When I was younger, it was hard for me to say, oh, I'm sorry, you gotta leave, I gotta go to bed. But now they show up, it's time to go to bed. I specifically tell them, you gotta get out, I'm going to sleep. And I don't even try to be nice about it. I just tell them. And they know me well enough, and they've been around long enough that they understand. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just sticking to my practice. And so what was a more fixed karma when I was a teenager and in high school now has become a non-fixed karma. I can choose to engage in it, or I can choose not to engage in it. I can choose to go drink that soda with my Chinese food, or I can choose to have just some green tea. Either way, super easy. So while there are these different ideas of fixed, easier, non-fixed karmas, we will see that as time goes on, a lot of what we had considered to be fixed really isn't. Now, the primary cause of karma, here we're getting right down to it. Hopefully you've stayed with me through this. The primary cause of karma. Well, in the Yoga Sutras, we can see that the primary cause of suffering is a mistaken sense of self-identity. And then it goes on to say that suffering which has not yet been experienced is to be ended. This is specifically from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Now, this requires a radical shift of viewpoint from how everyone else thinks. Everyone else tells you you have to have these good relationships, you have to have all this money, you have to have the perfect health, you have to have all these things in order to be happy. Well, that will give you some temporary happiness, and it is good to have those things because it makes life quite a bit easier. But even in the best circumstances, people die, people get sick, money is lost, you lose your positions, things that you thought were eternal crumble and fade away. People that you counted on, that you trusted, end up betraying you. And ideally, you have enough useful people in your life that doesn't happen. And that's a karma as well. Recently, I had an issue with some trust with some people that I knew. And they kind of said to me, well, because you have this trust issue, maybe you need to look at that, Ryan, because obviously that's a karma that you have. And there's some points missed there, because I have quite a few people in my life that I trust implicitly. And I'm lucky in that regard. They've always been upstanding. They've always said exactly what they felt. We were able to have this open communication. So we have to be aware of the fact that, yes, there are some things that are long-term karmas that we have to deal with. But if we look around to the rest of our life, if it's only active sporadically in certain areas, that's not necessarily a profound theme. And you don't want to believe people who tell you it is. But if you notice that you have this difficulty in many, many areas of your life and you can't trust anyone in your life, well, then yes, you might need to look at those things. But anyway, back to the point. The primary cause of suffering is a mistaken sense of self-identity. When you look at yogis and the people that are awake and clear, they're not attached to anything. If people appreciate their presentations and enjoy the work that they put forth, fine, they do their job. If they get ridiculed, if they are become the subject of a controversy, so what? They're not attached to this definition of being something in particular. Ramana Maharshi, even, probably one of the most authentic, accessible teachers that have ever been. I mean, he spent his life on a couch in the middle of an ashram, so there was no privacy there. He wasn't able to do things behind closed doors. Even him, there was a fellow who stood outside the ashram and would hand out leaflets to people coming to talk about how horrible Ramana Maharshi was. And when that was brought up to Ramana Maharshi, he said, no, that's right, it's fine, let him do it. Let him stay there, let him hand those things out. He said, because the people who are going to believe it, well, they probably don't need to be here in the first place. And the people who have some discernment and clarity, they'll see right through it. So because of his lack of attachment to, image, self-image, or how people saw him, he was able to remain authentic to what he knew was true. And you know this happens in your life. Sometimes people love you, sometimes they hate you. Sometimes they think that you're wonderful, sometimes they could care less. Sometimes there's always this rise and fall of appreciation for people. Sometimes your work goes very well, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have all the money you need, sometimes you're broke and in the hole. But if you pay attention, if you were that stuff, how could that be? Because it's always changing, yet you are still here. So with the Yoga Sutras, the primary cause of suffering is a mistaken self-identity. What yoga is driving you to do is to recognize that you are this eternal witnessing presence which observes the ever-changing experiences of nature, the rise and the fall. And when you actually have a direct experience of that, you are free. You are free. Whether your body is healthy or whether your body has some challenges, you know you're not your body. So internally, you're not disturbed by it. You know you're a human being, so sometimes things are going to go wrong. Sometimes things might go really wrong. But the more you are identified with that internal sense of self, the less upset you are about it. That doesn't mean you don't try to keep the engines running well. Because again, it's much easier to meditate when things are going well. But the more skillful you get at meditation, the more you understand what you truly are, then when things go wrong, you can actually still meditate. You know, when my wife was in the hospital for 1.5 years, going through chemotherapy and bone marrow transplants, and I was sleeping in the chair beside her every single night, I was getting no sleep. She wasn't either, because things would beep, nurses would come in, blood needed to be taken. We have to take her to do this. I had no sleep for 1.5 years, and I was miserable in body, mind, and spirit. And she was too. So we were going through this together. But because I had 18 years of consistent meditation practice, I still meditated every day. Every chance I got, when there was a down moment, I would just sit up in that chair and I would go within. Why was I able to do that? Because I had 18 years of habit, 18 years of karma that I had been creating in this lifetime, so that when things went that wrong, I could still turn within and experience what you experience in meditation. And that's what we need to do. Suffering which has not yet been experienced is to be ended. Now, this is the whole purpose of the Yoga Sutras and Kriya Yoga and yoga practice. So we don't have time, and we're not going to go into all of that. Just simply learn Kriya Yoga. Do what you're doing. If you want to study the Yoga Sutras, we go through that in year 2 of the Kriya Yoga Apprenticeship Program. There's a downloadable course on the Yoga Sutras at kriyayogaonline.com. Mr. Davis has wrote a book on the Yoga Sutras, The Science of Self-Realization. I have done a commentary on the Yoga Sutras, Kriya Yoga Continuing the Lineage of Enlightenment. Everything that is in those texts, everything that is in the practice of yoga, that is the purpose of yoga, is to end that which causes suffering, to end it. Some people translate it as avoid it. But if you look at how that word plays out, it can, one of the nuances is you end it. So you can take that practically as suffering which has not yet been experienced is to be ended. which means I'm getting ready to have a reaction to something a friend or a family member did, and I'm going to lose my temper, and I'm going to create more suffering for both of us. Well, how do you end that before you experience it? You just shut it down right there. That's more practical stuff. But it is the practice of yoga which stops your identification with all the stuff that causes suffering. You meditate and you recognize, I'm not my body. So when disease or death comes around, you might be uncomfortable because it's not a pleasant temporary experience. But since you know you are not your body, you know what you are eternally, really, truly, deep down inside, you can say, yeah, I'm not going to enjoy this, but I know what I am, and my consciousness continues whether the body is there or not. That's why yogis can do that. That's why Ramana Maharshi, for example, when he was diagnosed with cancer, they told him, they wanted him to have surgery, to have it removed. And he said, whether you remove it or not, it doesn't really matter. It'll probably just come back. And so he finally agreed to the surgery. And sure enough, it came back. And he passed. But when people were upset about him leaving, he would always say things like, well, where can I go? How can I be away from you? And he wasn't saying the physical body. He meant the real essence of him, the spirit of him. It's always there because it is us. And in that process, he was illustrating, demonstrating, there is this eternal thing, presence, life. It's so subtle. You're not going to be able to recognize it in this mundane experience. That's why we meditate. But once you get a hold of it, once you know that's you, it's like when you recognize that you're not your clothes. You can take your clothes off every single day and you're still fine. You put new clothes on. But if you're identified with the clothing, you never want to take them off, and they get old and ratty and smelly and disease-causing. So this is kind of how we have to think about these things. So it is the practice of yoga, the whole practice of yoga, which ends the suffering. The practice of yoga eliminates obstacles to self-knowledge. Once you know what you are free. Just like now, you know as an adult that you can pay your bills, that you can have healthy relationships, that, you're capable. Whereas when you were a child, you were at the whims of everyone else and you did not know these things. So the self-knowledge of your capability allows you to be successful and happy and peaceful at this point in time versus the way you were when you were a child. And as you practice meditation, you grow up spiritually. You grow from the human experience to the angelic, to the sannyasi. And again, by angelic, I don't mean wings flying around in heaven. I mean a clearer state of consciousness. And the things that seem so important as a human aren't necessarily so important. And of course, refraining from harmful behaviors, faithful adherence to constructive practices, firm meditation posture, pranayama practice, internalized attention, concentration, meditation, and samadhi are the 8 limbs of yoga practice. So it is through this that's the whole point of yoga. Through this, we rise above, transcend, alter our karma. These practices contribute to the development of sattva. So what is sattva? This comes up over and over again in the Yoga Sutras. Sattva is a state of clarity and understanding. You know when you are not bogged down by trauma, by anxieties, by obsessions and compulsions, when you're not bogged down by fears, when you're not bogged down by these things, you are clear and you are happy and things don't bother you so much, But let's say you're bogged down by trauma, anxiety, memories that you can't deal with, and someone cuts you off. Well, immediately you fly into a rage. It's not that big a deal. Someone cut you off, so what? Maybe they're in a hurry to take their loved one somewhere. But because you have this weight of all this other stuff bearing down on you, it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back, and you lose it. Well, the purpose of yoga is to develop this quality of sattva, which is shedding traumas, shedding your attachments, shedding your anxieties, shedding all of this stuff, so that you naturally abide in a state of clarity and understanding. I was talking to an individual, those of you who are Patreon members or students of the Kriya Yoga apprenticeship program, I have office hours where people can schedule and we can meet for 20 minutes at a time, just to catch up and see how their practice is doing. And one of the students contacted me, and we were talking over Zoom, and he said, I had this interesting experience that I was at home, and he has 3 kids and he works and he's married. I was at home, and it was in during the weekend, and I didn't have a whole lot to worry about. Meaning I didn't have the work stress, the kids were all taken care of. And in that time of having that freedom, he says, it's like I naturally went into a super conscious state. He's like, is that possible? I said, yes, because the whole point of yoga practice is to not be identified with all that stress and all that struggle. So when you just kind of take some time to relax, and there's not this backlog of stuff, because one of the things we have to remember is that, for example, when I used to take people on retreats to Costa Rica, Wednesdays were always terrible because they're in a tropical paradise. They're being served the freshest, most amazing foods. They're meditating, they're doing yoga, they're getting massages. It's a beautiful situation, but Wednesdays were terrible. Why? Because they've just started to experience relaxation. They've just started to kind of sink into a space of safety and contentment. And what happens? All that backlog of crap that they've never dealt with, they don't understand why they've got anxiety, why they're feeling depressed, why they're feeling angry. Because all this stuff is now it's safe. Now it can come out because they're relaxed. So that's why when it comes to spirituality and meditation, I almost always recommend that working with a counselor, working with a therapist to get through that stuff will make your meditation practice so much better. Resolving all of that stuff through skillful means will make it so that when that day comes and you are calm and nothing is going on, you can just simply release yourself into that super consciousness. And you don't have to worry about this backlog of garbage from your past ruining it. So by developing a sattvic state, we're creating the groundwork to be able to see what is real. But we have to have done some preliminary work. That's why in the Yoga Sutras it says, and now instruction in yoga practice at the very beginning. And now instruction in yoga practice. It means you have done the work so that you can appreciate the experience. Because yoga is not meant to be your psychotherapy. Yoga is meant to give you realization of the depth of what you truly are. Your psychotherapy needs to be your psychotherapy. Just like when you start to change your diet positively, maybe now you have more gas, maybe your digestion shifts and changes. It doesn't mean that eating more vegetables is bad for you. It means that your digestion now has to shift to processing vegetables versus all the garbage you've been feeding it. So the practice of yoga contributes to the development of sattva, because it's in sattva that we can see and experience what is real. We are then able to be strong, capable, and safe. That's the key there. Once you are able to feel strong, capable, and safe, your meditation and yoga practice becomes one of the most enjoyable things of your life. It was described one time as getting in a nice hot bath. Just everything goes away but that warmth and that peacefulness. But if you've got this backlog of crap, of psychological complexes and so on, every time you manage to hit a state of clarity, it's going to come up. So that's why you have to do some work to deal with that. And it's not yoga's role to do that. It's your counselor's role, your psychotherapist's role. It's whatever self-help methods you can use to move through those things. I started developing a relationship with a teenager. You've heard me talk about her before, who had a really traumatic experiences in life. And then in the relationship, things became safer. Things became calmer. Things became just nicer, more. I'm thinking this is the case. I suppose I should ask her. More peaceful and more calm. And what happened, there was a period of time where more of her stress started to come out. More of her anxiety started to come out. Why? Because now there was a safe space. And luckily, I had wise elders around me to point that out to me, because I'm thinking, what's going on here? I would have given anything to feel so comfortable at this point in stage in my life. Why is this frustration, this difficulty coming out? And Jim Norton, one of my most helpful mentors, retired Methodist minister, going to be 80 soon. He's been through a lot of stuff, and he said to me, he's like, Ryan, he just told me, he said, you're providing, you and Jasmine are providing now a wonderful, peaceful space. And because of that, there is this openness, this freedom, that all that stuff that was down in there can come out freely, because it's not going to be beat down, it's not going to be punished. And so that just might have to happen. And as far as I can tell, that's actually been the case. But we do this too in all of our life situations. So yoga is making this space and this clarity. And we might need help sometimes to accept it, to process that backlog of crap. And then we are free. And the picture here of this family, on a beach jumping up and down, I chose this picture specifically because in order to appreciate the sunlight, the ocean, the beach, you have to be able to be there. And this is a family, and I chose this picture as well because when I think about the idea of sattva, clarity and understanding, well, as we get deeper into the Yoga Sutras, it then goes on to say, but you even have to let go of attachment to sattva. You even have to let go of attachment to clarity and understanding. And in the beginning, I was always like, well, what's the point in even doing that? I mean, if you got to let go of it anyway, it just seems silly. So I wrestled with that for many years. But it finally occurred to me that sattva is like your jumping off point. In order to really understand what's being taught in yoga, you have to engage the practices to develop sattva so that you are safe, you are clear, you're not afraid of losing yourself in the infinite, you're not afraid of letting go of your personality, of your small sense of self, and you can then jump off into the infinite. And I use this picture of the family, the happy family, because if you come from a happy family, what is the role of the parents in that family? To raise that child so that it feels confident, strong, capable, so that when it's 18 years old, 19 years old, it can say, hey, I'm leaving. I'm going to go get a job. I'm going to go get myself an apartment, and I'm going to go start building my own life. And that healthy, happy family did that because there is a strength there, a security there, a capability that I can do that. The child can do that. And they go off and they do their best, and they might fail, but they know they can come back and check back in and learn and grow from their family. But there's not an anxiety of leaving because there is strength and love there. Versus a family that does what? That doesn't want their child to leave, that wants them to stay weak and wants them to stay around because the parents feel more comfortable having this person close. They don't want them to grow up and be strong and become their own person. So you see, developing sattva from the yogic perspective is a lot like being a very good parent or family, where you're cultivating strength and safety and wisdom so the child can go out, can live, can be successful, and if they make a mistake, it doesn't matter because they can feel confident enough that they can change and grow. So when you're thinking about developing sattva, always try to remember this idea of it's like coming from a healthy, supportive, strong, autonomous family that wants the children to grow up and be strong in their own. They want them to go away and not have separation anxiety. Because once you experience sattva, you don't sit there and think, oh, do I really want to let go of my small self? Do I really want to, leave all this stuff behind? You become so strong in spirit, so strong in light and understanding that you look back and say, that was great. It served its purpose. On to the next thing. So this is why I chose this particular photo here.